Yo, what is going on, my fellow weebs? Chrono here, and welcome back to the channel. So today, we're going to be talking about the 10-star Ektasis armors that have been released with the recent Lucille update, and basically my recommendations for whether or not you should be upgrading into them, or just information you should know about before you look into upgrading into these armors. But before we jump to that, if you're new here, as always, my name is Chrono. I primarily cover PSO2 content. Would much appreciate a subscribe as we work our way towards that 10K mark, hopefully, by the end of this year. Anyway, let's go ahead and jump into this. So, quick disclaimer, these videos are meant to be informative, that way you can make an informed decision on whether or not you should be walking or upgrading towards, I say walking towards, but you should be moving towards these new armors that we have had released recently. This is not a situation where anyone's going to flame you, at least not on my end, because you are not just immediately jumping to the newest, latest, and greatest thing. Everyone is at a different point of their gearing process, and I want to make sure that you understand where you can get extra power without really having to hold yourself back. It's a very common issue that tends to happen in PSO2NGS, and in most cases it seems very silly, or just information gets spread in a way that it just seems very disingenuous. But we're going to take a look at how these armors would affect me personally, how they would affect the average player, how you can kind of deal with certain situations, and the future of what these armors are to bring. It's going to be very similar to my previous videos where I did like the true power of series, where we talk about different weapons and things like that. We haven't had a weapon in a while. That series will come back. I stopped talking about event weapons because realistically speaking, they just weren't interesting, unfortunately. If you guys want to see that again, I'm more than happy to do those videos. They didn't really feel it. It felt like saying the same thing each time and being disappointed in the augment each time. So I kind of shied away from doing those, but if that's something you guys want to see, let me know in the comments. I'm more than happy to bring those back and talk about where they kind of fit into the overall meta, as far as how much power you really are gaining versus how much power you might be losing out on. But that is a topic for another video. Let's talk about these 10-star Ektasis armors. Ektasis armors, that's it. So there has been a bit of contention with the new armors coming out because they are technically kind of in an incomplete state, if you really think about it. They've kind of announced this and they explained this ahead of time, and we sort of missed that they put this in a couple of places, or at least I did, and I explained that in yesterday's video, that I even missed where it shows it in the patch notes. But I'm going to talk about it here really quick, and then we're going to talk about kind of the future of these armors, and then like how you can use them today, or if you should really be using them today. So here we are on the update info page for PSO2NGS. If we scroll on down, get to the section about Lucille, bam, our 10-star Ektasis armors are here. More enhancements coming soon in the future. What does that really mean though? So let's talk about more enhancements coming. Well, as always, Dengeki has been fantastic at just leaking everything to us, as they tend to do. So they had an article where they talk about this, and granted, again, I didn't get the link to this exact article. If you guys want to provide it to me in Discord, I'd appreciate it, so on and so forth, but not a really big deal. I was informed very heavily that the only thing new that we didn't know about was this section here, and it's this section right at the bottom. So rarity 10-star Ektasis armor is characterized by a 6% increase in power and a parameter equivalent to a rarity in defense. Parameters such as HP, PP will be increased in the future upgrades, so please take this opportunity to get them and strengthen them to prepare for upgrades. The entire point of this from the development team is they expect you to move towards these armors because they will have HP and PP, or basically utility stats in the future. Now, talking about armors, in the past, we've had to wait for armors to get a lot of these stats, right? Like the Ainea armor started with 20 HP and 2 PP. If you go onto the VO that came out afterwards, it gave you 6 PP, as opposed to Gamma that's 20 HP. And if you just waited even longer, you got what arguably was essentially the best choice, which is the Ainea armor Arga, Belta, and Sheza, which would give you the most HP and PP, and get damage resistance. Trade-off being that you had to wait a little bit longer for those armors to come out, and we really didn't know when they were going to come out until they announced them. So it's a bit more of an annoyance. If you were someone who wanted to get your armors when they first came out, that we can push as much power as possible, you had that longevity there because you had your armors longer than other people. However, you missed out on of course, the utility stats of the HP and PP provided. I mean, upwards of 105 HP and 21 PP and 3% damage resistance, which we know is not just 3%, it's everything is multiplicative in this game. And of course, you have the statuses. That is what it is. Status is what it is. Apparently, I'm told that was because it came out, or these armors came out at the same time as the Gorge came out, and I do remember that. So, or at least the Gorge update. So that's pretty dope. But basically creates this situation where like people were just waiting for armors, and that's not the first time that's happened. The Octo armor did the same thing, people waiting and waiting. I don't know how many times I heard the conversation of, oh, when the purple armor is going to come out, when the purple armor is going to come out. And then like it just created this sort of loop that was an issue ever since 8-star armors. And it seems like they're trying to fix that problem with the 10-star armors. They are flat out going to be the best choice, at least from what we can understand as of right now, being 6%. And they have no HP, PP damage resistance, or status resistances on them. However, we know because of this Dengeki article that they will be upgradable in the future. What that technically means, the way they've been phrasing it and talking about it, essentially made it put it in a way that you'll be able to take your armors and then essentially add these stats to them or upgrade them into armors that have these stats. They have said in the past that if they were to do another system where you transfer or transition weapons and upgrade them, that they will retain augments. This was a big problem with, I believe, was it Kaiser back in the day? I believe it was I want to say it was Kaiser. Yes, Kaiser was the weapon, aka the Blue Rayar. Essentially, you would get a previous weapon, a Rocks weapon, and you would upgrade it into your Kaiser weapon. And because you go through this upgrade process, you lose all of the augments that were on the Rocks weapon. This was a huge issue for players, so this is something they said that if they did this again, this would not be a problem. So I don't foresee there being an issue with augmenting these weapons or these armors and then upgrading into them. They likely will carry over all of our augments. So should you upgrade into this gear? From a damage perspective, it's better. There's no contest, no argument. It's just more damage. Is it a ton more damage? No. And it probably doesn't feel like as much more damage, realistically speaking, because it's not as much of a jump as we got from going from 8 to 9 stars. Going 8 to 9 stars, we had a 1% damage jump. Now, 0.5 is something to scoff at. Yes, it is only 0.5, but in PSO2NGS, 0.5 is not only 0.5, because again, say it with me, everything is multiplicative. So you're getting a lot more out of it than that 0.5 is. Granted, we got a lot more out of this one when we jumped from the 8-star to the 9-star, but you are getting a lot more out of than 0.5 out of each armor upgrade you're going for. So it does mean more. However, you are trading off, at least right now. Keep in mind, at least right now, it's a big distinction needs to be made. The utility portion of your armor for the extra bits of damage. So who realistically should be picking up these 10-star armors? Well, I think it actually favors the lower tier players first, because you don't have heavy investment into your armor. Re-augmenting an Ektasis armor is not that big of a deal for you if you're using something like LC augments. Getting the most out of your augments is actually going to be helpful for you, and that extra bump in damage will help to, closing the gap a little bit more between you and maybe that top end player that you're going for. Now, if you don't care about damage at all and you're like, I'm just going to use my free armor, then I don't know why you're here in this video itself. It's up to you if you want to listen to it. I appreciate you guys supporting my channel regardless, but this comment isn't really for you. This is for someone who is trying to progress their armor and trying to do it in a reasonable manner for themselves, not break the bank, but also get the most out of it they possibly can. So as far as the Ektasis armor from a damage perspective, yes, it is worth it. It's better. We're even going to go over to damage calculator. So you're about to get flashbanged. You have been warned. We're going to go over to damage calculator right now. Cakewalk's damage calculator, and you can see that it's worth it. I mean, you can even see the damage number. Just keep an eye on effective damage. As I scroll down here, this is actually my current gear setup that I have right now. As I scroll down and just swap these armors to Ektasis, you can watch big number 1237. Actually, we're gonna go back. Starts at 12,259. $12,317. $12,376. And 12,434. So yes, it is going to be a damage increase. However, you are going to lose out on those utility stats. So what utility stats are you losing out on? Well, that depends on where you are in your gearing process. What armor are you using, right? So let's say, for example, you're someone who's using, I don't know, the freebie armor they hand you. Well, you're not losing anything. You're just gaining. So even if you were to take the new 10-star armor, get it to level 81, you don't have to get it to 90, just get it to 81 to get all the augment slots, and put all of your LC augments on it, it is a massive bump in damage comparatively to your S-Fin armor. If you actually look back, I'm again flashbang you guys, apologies. If you actually look at the damage calculation, I left Eridim in here and SVent just mostly for the meme, but you can see like when you calculate in the armor along with this, so this is just using an Argencool weapon. When you calculate Argencool with SVent set, so this is using the actual SVent set and how it comes, there's a 50% damage difference between my gear at max end with the current augments versus the freebie gear they hand you. It is pretty massive, and granted, yes, I'm fairly geared, right? But this, like, even if you were someone who is going with a lower end setup, like, you're still looking at, in most cases, probably close to a 30% damage difference. It's pretty huge. So if you're someone who has absolutely no gear whatsoever, yes, pick up the new armor and get it to 81. Maybe pick it up and hold on to the armor itself and wait until they have one of those events where you can upgrade your gear cheaper. That's totally understandable. I get that because it's expensive and a lot of Meseta costs to go into your gear, but there is tons of LC augments. And funny enough, we just went through a video on the channel talking about that. So in case you're like, hey, I don't know what augments to put on this new gear, balling on a budget, nearly zero cost augment setup where we go through an entire augment setup that you can use on your gear and spend next to nothing. Actually, almost completely nothing. Actually, I'm pretty sure every augment was under 5K. So you can get a lot done in a very, very little cost amount of time. Granted, the cost of upgrading your gear is gonna be the cost of upgrading your gear. Can't get around that, but you can get quite a bit going. Now, let's say you saw that video beforehand and you didn't realize Ektasis armor was here, and maybe you picked up, I don't know, the Ainea armor because you shouldn't be getting the Octos. The only reason you should have an Octo armor on at all is if you just haven't upgraded from previous when you had Octo armor. Just this shouldn't be a consideration. Let's say you upgrade off of SVent and you're in the 9-star region, right? Like you're here. So what's the worst case scenario? Again, we're still talking LC augments. So you're still in a position where re-augmenting your gear is not super expensive. What are you realistically losing out on? Well, at most, you're losing 105 HP, 21 PP, 3% damage resistance or 1% damage resistance per unit, and of course, the status resistance. Status resistance, damage resistance aren't really that big of a deal. The HP might be a big deal for some. I don't really think 105 HP really matters all that much. In most cases, it's not going to be make or break, especially with how much HP we have access to and what I'm going to talk about here in just a moment anyway. It's the 21 PP that can be a little bit rough. Now, it depends on your class highly, whether that 21 PP matters or not. So you need to ask yourself when you're playing and you're actually paying attention, do you run out of PP in a situation where 21 PP would make a major difference for you, right? For me personally, I'm at kind of a sweet spot how much PP I have, where I'm able to essentially just throw out PAs at the beginning of a fight just long enough or have just enough PP to sustain me until I get to my very first pinion, which then gives me a big chunk of PP back. So for me, I'm at a kind of the perfect spot. So losing out on a good chunk of PP could be fairly, detrimental for me. However, let's say, for example, you're someone who plays, I don't know, something sub force, right? Like you're like, I don't like running out of PP, so I play sub force. Well, that 21 PP doesn't matter for you much anymore because realistically speaking, you have some of the best PP economy in the entire game. You're able to then deal without it. Let's say you're playing something like Hunter and you feel very tanky and you don't have a situation where you have to deal with PP issues that often. Well, now that 105 HP doesn't really matter as much to you. You feel a lot more comfortable overall and you're not too worried about missing out on that. Maybe you play something like Fighter and that damage resistance does help you out, right? Like this is a consideration you have to make. It's not really a blanket statement across the board on should everyone upgrade based on this or should they not. It really depends on overall playstyle and class you're playing. It is worth mentioning that you can go through and get a lot of these stats from your add-on skills, which funny enough, now that I mention it, your boy did a comprehensive guide literally 3 weeks ago talking about how to roll your add-on skills, what add-on skills to look for, and just generally how to set yourself up for success. So I do find a lot of players ask me, about their gear and things like that. And they're like, yeah, how do I get more HP? How do I get more PP? How do I deal with these situations? In most cases, it's their add-on skills. Like if I tap in a game really quick, I've got 1300 HP. And I mean, I'm missing food. Usually I have 1390 something HP and 230, or was it 237 PP? I have a ton of HP and PP, but a lot of that comes from add-on skills. I get, 20 PP from Waker alone, and I'm getting a ton of HP every time I roll anywhere between a 15 and a 20. I can get some extra HP where I don't need that stat in something else. So I get a ton of HP and a ton of PP just for my add-on skills. And if you're in a position where, again, this HP, the 105 HP, that amount of PP isn't really doing anything for you, then there's no reason not to go to the Ektasis armor. You're pretty much good to go. Now let's talk about where you run into some problems based on what we're currently dealing with. So if you currently have a set of Ainea armor that's more or less augmented to the teeth, right? Like you're fully best in slot, you're fully augmented, you've kind of min-maxed what you really need, should you upgrade to Ektasis armor? Only if you can do without the HP and PP. That's it. There is no problem with upgrading to Ektasis armor. If you have the augmentation transfer passes, they have been available, and as people are like, oh, when we get more, I'll do it. They've literally given us enough to actually farm out 2 augmentation transfer passes, basically, if not almost exactly 2 augmentation transfer passes. I haven't really even tried to have enough to farm. I've already had enough, about 1.5. So if you've been farming augmentation transfer passes, you have been able to get at least 2 of them, I believe, at this point in time, or at least very close to 2. And there's a third one on the way they've already mentioned via limited tasks. So you can very easily get the 3 that you need. However, you really don't need to jump to Ektasis armor immediately. There is another thing to mention when it comes to high-end players, and that's stuff like Fixa. If you don't have the proper Fixa on your armor, it becomes much more difficult for you to be able to push out extra damage. Getting that PB when you absolutely need it versus it showing up right after a break can be a pretty massive difference in your overall damage. And you can lose quite a bit where gaining that extra 0.5 per unit wasn't worth it for you. In a big way, you end up losing damage as opposed to gaining it. Now you can always argue that, hey, you can change up your augments, right? Like if we look at my augments, we can actually see that I got rid of Haikavar Dominant in favor of Melrod Dual because it actually does come out to be more damage. However, I could go back to it and get that extra 6 PP, essentially counteracting the loss of the 6 PP that I'd be getting from switching off of these VOs into Ektasis. But what would be the point? Because I would just be gaining 0.5 to lose 0.5, because going back to the Haikavar Domina would end up putting me in a situation where I lose 0.5. So at the end of the day, it really doesn't make much sense for someone who's really geared to jump into this armor instantaneously. It actually is better the lower you are on the gearing totem pole, which is actually very interesting. So in summary, if you don't have a ton of gear, you pretty safely can go in Ektasis as long as you can mitigate the situation of your HP and PP. And I find in most cases, most players can. It's very rare that a player is really min-maxing their HP and PP. Usually they're just saying, I want to get as much of it as possible to be able to spam out as many PAs as possible. But in a lot of cases, it's not actually giving you more damage. Unless you quite literally are getting more PAs by the end of a fight, like you're tracking your PAs like that, you haven't actually increased in damage. Or unless you're getting more PAs in more opportune situations, the damage increase isn't there. And at the end of the day, if you're not really playing for that level of damage, it's not that big of a deal. Just take the free damage where you can get it at this point. And Ektasis armor is pretty cheap. It's downwards of 100k at the moment, 150k, I believe. So it's very interesting how things tend to work out. But if you're very high on the totem pole as far as gearing goes, just collect your Ektasis armors, get ready to transfer over to them, get ready to take a look at what they're going to be offering and adding to them, and get those fixes leveled up when they provide us a boost to Fixa rates. Or if you're crazy, smash them together now and see if you can get those fixes pushed up. Because yeah, dealing without or just 3-man would be super painful for me in a lot of different fights. Well, hopefully it helps you guys out. I did want to go ahead and go over this at the very least, that way you guys can make an informed decision, because I did see a lot of conversation about this. And in some cases, people are just saying the armor is bad, and that's just quite literally not true. It isn't perfect for everyone just yet, but it is in an unfinished state, and it is going to be getting stronger in the future. Granted, it may not be damage specifically, but it will be a lot of things that we will definitely want. Either way, thanks for watching all the way end. I like if you enjoyed the video. Sub if you want to keep up with more. Thanks to the channel members. You guys are fantastic, and I appreciate every single one of you. I'll see you next time. Take care, my friends. Peace out.